Well, now here we are. We have found out how big antitype is, beginning to end. Basically the beginning of the Bible to the end of the Bible, Genesis to Revelation. It's all about the sanctuary. It's all about God's dealings with the sin problem on this planet. It is the arena in which God has made to contain sin. To me, that's a very comforting thought. It doesn't leave me anything to boast about. I did it. No, God's doing it. He's got a plan. He's in charge. Isn't that wonderful? I know that we were told, and it is written somewhere in Mrs. White's writings, that Jesus would have come ere this had we been ready. Well, we're never going to be ready. I mean, look at us. We're a sad lot. We get worse and worse as time goes on. It never worked for the Israelites. And you remember, if you've read the Bible at all, in the prophets, the minor prophets, it all talks about how things could have been different had the Israelites done it right. But they never did. And God knows they never would, and He knew we never would. That's also why in Isaiah and Jeremiah, in Psalms, in other portions of the Bible, well, all of the sanctuary services talk about the Lamb, Jesus. The whole story would have been different had Israel been able to get their act together. Same with us. Things would have been different had we gotten our act together. But God knew we wouldn't. That's why He's made an arena, a place, a plan, a containment for sin. That's wonderful. It takes it out of my hands. I don't have to get perfect before Jesus comes. I have to rely on Him and His righteousness for my perfection. It's all through Him. It's all through the Lamb. And He's got it contained. Now we're going to look again at this chart. This, once again, is the pattern for antitype. If we look over here at the first season of feasts in the spring of the year, beginning in Nisan and ending in Tishri, you have 6 months and 22 days. There are 6 months between the evening of the 14th and 15th and the evening of the 14th and 15th here. 2 different feasts. The evening of, the first of the month and the first of the month. 6 months. From the 10th to the 10th, 6 months. The entire program is 6 months and 22 days. Looking at, boy, there's something so familiar about this. 6 months and a 7th month. It just, there is something about it that rings a bell. And we're going to find out what that is, because now we have to find out how big is 1 month. Because if 1844 happened right here on the 10th day of Tishri, Day of Atonement, 1844, then when did all these other feasts take place? Now we know that this one right here, the first Passover on the 14th of Abib or Nisan, could not have been Jesus' death on the cross. Because if this plan covers the entire years of Earth's history, well, Jesus died, 2,000 plus years ago, or not quite 2,000 years ago? And this is much bigger than 2,000 years. So let's look into each one of these months and find out how big a month is. That will open up everything for us. So now we need to read from Exodus 12, 1 to 6. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall be the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month they shall take every man a lamb according to their father's house, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, then the man and his neighbor next to his house shall take according to the number of persons. According to what each man can eat, you shall make your account for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male, a year old. You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs in the evening. My. Well, that tells us all about Passover season. Some believe that it didn't begin until until Moses in the wilderness. But we've already established that it began at the very beginning. The first day of the first month was somewhere before our creation. The lamb selected from the foundation of the world, was that the lamb selected on the 10th day? We're not sure, but sometime in there was creation. And I believe that first Passover lamb that was slain on the 14th was the very first lamb slain by Adam and Eve in the garden, representing Jesus. And the skins that Jesus clothed them with were their robes of righteousness, just as someday we will be clothed. We are clothed, if we accept him by faith, with his robes of righteousness, as were Aaron and Moses in the wilderness, with their priestly garments, clothed with the righteousness of the Lamb. Let's see, what does the next text say? That is not a text. It's from Great Controversy, 399 to 400. And I'm reading this again so that we can keep it in focus. In like manner, the types which relate to the second advent must be fulfilled at the time pointed out in the symbolic service. Under the Mosaic system, the cleansing of the sanctuary, or the Great Day of Atonement, occurred on the 10th day of the 7th Jewish month in the year 1844. Well, we see here that times are pointed out. So let's go down to Exodus 13:10. You shall therefore keep this ordinance, speaking of unleavened bread, the Passover time, at its appointed time from year to year. At its appointed time. Appointed times are very, very important. Exodus 23:14 and 17. 3 times in the year you shall keep a feast to me. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, as I commanded you. You shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib. That was Nisan, the Passover season. For in it you came out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty-handed. You shall keep the feast of harvest, of the first fruits of your labor, of what you sow in the fields. You shall keep the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather in from the field the fruit of your labor. 3 times in the year shall all your males appear before the Lord. As you saw in the graph, there were the 3 sections, the spring, the summer, and the fall harvest season. They each are harvest. That's beautiful, because antitype for harvest is the harvest of our souls. That's beautiful. God just has a way, doesn't he? So let's go to the next one. That's Daniel 8:17 and 19. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened and fell upon my face. But he said to me, Understand, O Son of Man, that the vision is for the time of the end. As he was speaking to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and set me on my feet. He said, Behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation, the time of the end, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. I told you, God has it all under control. We don't need to worry about it. He's in charge. Now, there are some things we need to look at in this chart, because figuring out how big one day is, or figuring out how big 1 month is tricky business. So I'll get up over here out of the way. You see in here the biggest circle right here on top, God's arena for the sin problem. Now, right from the beginning, we're going to say that each month of the sanctuary year equals 1,000 years, or it represents 1,000 years in Earth's history. And we're going to substantiate that. First, over there on the left, you see Creation Week. There are 7 days, obviously. Then there's the 7 years to a Sabbath rest for the land. 7 years. Then there are 7 weeks of 7 to the 49th Sabbath and the rest for the Feast of Weeks or the Feast of First Fruits. Then there are 7 years times 7 years to the 49th year of the rest for the land. And then on the 50th, the Jubilee. Boy, we're dealing with a lot of sevens here. Now look down at the bottom, if you will, the larger circles right over here. The first one is Nisan, then all the other months, which I have a hard time pronouncing, and Tishri at the end. Each one of them 1,000 years. I have some texts over here which I don't believe you'll be able to read, but it will be in the manuscript. And those texts all point at the different days. We need to now go to the next graph because we're going to compare the 7 days of creation to the 7 months of, oh, there are my clues. All right. There are 7 days in a week, and the 7th being the Sabbath. The Feast of Weeks, First Fruits on the 49th Sabbath. 6 years to plant and harvest. The 7th year, Sabbath rest for the land. Leviticus 25:7. Then we have 7 times 7 weeks of years to the 49th year harvest. 48th year harvest. 49th year, Sabbath for the land. And 50th year Jubilee. So there are a lot of sevens. And once again, I showed you this smaller graph. And we will, in the next one, go to the how to calculate it. But first, let's compare Creation Week in the 7 days to the 7 months of the sanctuary. In the first month, that's the spring feast. Well, on the first day of creation, light was created. Let's read some texts for that first one. We're also going to be reading texts for the 3rd day of creation and the 7th day of creation. The 3rd day of creation was land and vegetation. Remember, the waters were separated from the land, and then vegetation grew on the land. So basically, the 3rd day of creation, the earth itself was created. The 6th day of creation, animals were created, and then man was created. The 7th day was the day of rest. Now, let's see what the other texts say, what we can find texts that substantiate this. The first day, Genesis 1:3, light was created. John 1:9, the true light that enlightens every man was coming into the world. Now, as you can see, I left man out of that sentence, but I know if you read John 1:9, you'll find that there is that word in there that I left out. John 1:29, the next day he saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." So Jesus was the true light, and he was the Lamb. Revelation 13:8, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of the life of the Lamb that was slain. Also see Patriarchs and Prophets, page 63. So the Lamb being slain from the foundation of the world was the light. And light was created on the first day. And the first feast of the sanctuary year was all about the Lamb, the Passover Lamb. Jesus, the light of the world and the Lamb of our salvation, was the first of God's creation. Revelation 13:8, Hebrews 9:26. Now, the creation week continues. The third day, Genesis 1:9. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." So basically, like I said before, the earth was created the third day. Psalms 24:1. We're going to pick this text apart. "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein." So, the earth. The earth is the water and the land. The fullness thereof, well, that would be the harvest of the land. The world and those who dwell therein, well, those are the people. And they're also the harvest of the land. So the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the world and those who dwell therein represent the third day of creation. John 11:52. Let's read that, shall we? "And not for the nation only, but together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad." That's a harvest. Isn't that beautiful? See, the Bible, all of it, it's all about the harvest of souls. It's all about the plan of salvation. It's how God works and deals with man. That's the third day of creation. Let's find out about the sixth and seventh day. Genesis 1:25 and 26. "And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the cattle according to their kinds. Then God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air. So God created man in his own image the sixth day." Now that sixth day is represented both in the sixth month, at the end of the sixth month, but mainly in the seventh month as well. Because if you go, like I said before, between the 15th of the month of Abib, or Nisan, and the 15th month of Tishri, which is the last month of the year, is just 6 months. And if you go from the 10th day of the first month to the 10th day of the seventh month, that is also 6 months. And the 10th day was Day of Atonement, and the Lamb was slain for our sins. So there is an application here for the sixth day. Let's read yet Romans 5:14. "Yet death reigned from Adam to Moses even over those sins whose sins were not like the transgressions of Adam, who was a type of the one who was to come." So if man was created in the evening of the sixth day, Jesus died on the evening of the 14th day, did he not? Passover. Now reading from Genesis 2:1-3, about the seventh day. "On the seventh day, God finished his work which he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all his work which he had done in creation." 2 Peter 3:8. "But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. 1 day of creation week equaling 1 month of the sanctuary year, or 1 month representing 1,000 years. Revelation 24:4-7. "The righteous redeemed. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. And when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be loosed from his prison." That, my friends, is 1,000 years at the end. So, the days of creation week are the pattern for the sanctuary year. The sanctuary year equals 6 months and 22 days into the 7th month. 1 day creation equals 1 month sanctuary equals 1,000 years antitype. 1 month equals 1,000 years antitype. So let's take the 29.5 days, which is the average of the length of 1 month, lunar. Let's divide that into the 1,000 years. Right here we see that. Oops, if I can get my finger pointed right. Right here we see that. 29.5 goes into 1,033.898 antitype. Now, the 898 goes on and on and on and on. And why we don't round that is because it doesn't work. It needs to be 33.898. You will find this borne out that if you take 29.5 and multiply it by 2 for 2 months and divide it into 2,000 years, you get the same number, 33.898. And it goes on and on, clear down to 7 or 8 or 9 or as far as you want to go. It's still 33.898. Therefore, right over here, we see that 1 day in the antitype equals 1 day in the earthly copy. There are 199 days in the earthly copy. That's 6 months and 22 days. In the heavenly copy, the heavenly reality, there are 6,745.70 years. Now that's kind of a big number, and we'll be showing you how everything works into everything. Therefore, I guess I already went through this, didn't I? But we'll recap. There are 29.5 days in a Jewish lunar month. 29.5 units of time into 1,000 years, or into 1,000 units of time, equal 33.898. One type equals one antitype. We're not talking here yearly repetition. 1 for 1. Jesus was slain once as the lamb for our sins, not multiple times. But all those multiple times were simply to remind them. The 14th of Abib, Nisan, only happened once in 1 year. So you might say that 1 day also represents 1 year. 1 for 1. So we only count the days once. The reason for the yearly repetition was to remind the Israelites constantly of their sacrifice, of the sacrifice of Messiah to come, keeping their attention focused on the Lamb and the reason for its sacrifice, their sins. How sad it is that they turned the sanctuary system into idol worship. How sad it is that they never saw the Messiah in any of this. Some of them did. I shouldn't say none of them did. But as a nation, they missed out on something so beautiful. So, once again, here is the Jewish copy of the heavenly sanctuary as given to Moses by the Lord. 6 months, and then the 7th month. The last fall feast season of the year, wine and oil, is the last harvest of souls for here on earth. And that season represents the end of time. In our next segment, we will be learning all about the 3 covenants and how they all fit into the pattern.